Hey, everybody, welcome to Leading Thriving Cities. This is our show where we shine a spotlight on leadership in public service, and we have deep conversations about sustainability and how we build a thriving future for our cities. My name is Chad Wright. I'm the founder of Forward Partners, and I'm joined today by Terrell Smith. He's the Assistant City Manager of Melissa, Texas. And Terrell has done a lot in his young career in city management. He's got great insight into the challenges of being a young city manager and what it takes to go on that journey. You're going to find so much value in today's conversation. Thank you for joining us for Leading Thriving Cities. All right, Terrell, thank you for joining us today on Leading Thriving Cities. You are currently Assistant City Manager of Melissa, Texas. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Assistant City Manager in Melissa, Texas. So
And
North DFW area now.
Yes, and you've been a city manager before, and really city manager at a young age as well. And so I'm fascinated to learn some more about that. But for our first question, when we dive in, what is one thing you wish people really understood about city management and public service?
Yeah, and I'll talk a little bit about both from a city manager standpoint and an assistant city manager standpoint, just because a lot of people in general do not know about local government. They
Yeah.
don't know how local government functions, right? And so oftentimes it's pointed at the mayor or the city council members, but really the day-to-day operations, all the responsibility and balancing everything falls on the city manager. And so I think one of the things that I really wish people would just know is that the city manager role is one that's really public. You know, there's a commitment that person really does to the public. And so we're talking now, I'm in the Dallas area, 17 degrees outside, feels like -2, right? And so it's there is a commitment that we all have to do to the public. Oftentimes it's people that we don't know, or oftentimes it's with people who are frustrated about something. Their trash wasn't picked up that day, their water, in our standpoint, the water has to be running, but the water isn't running or they got a bill. And so I just a commitment to the public that we have, but then also that we're working with staff and we're working with others who are committed to the public.
Yeah.
Some of the unsung heroes, we always talk about police and fire, but we also have public works departments that are at 2 a.m., they're in the ground 6 feet deep, oftentimes fixing the main break or trying to find the leak or identifying that valve. Nothing's worse than having a valve that's out and it's like, okay, where's our mapping system, right?
And it doesn't matter if it's 17 degrees outside. They're still down in the hole and doing the work. And I think most people lose track of that, right? They don't understand how much sacrifice it takes to just keep the water flowing.
No, they don't. And it's funny because, and I hate, now that I'm thinking about it, I hate that I led off with the sacrifice for the main breaks or the emergency situations because it's also events, like we do offer different special events for people to where if it's a holiday, it's the city having an event, and so it's okay, 4th of July is coming up. We're still pulling staff in, we're still pulling people in from the city in order to provide for the community. And so I think sometimes I just wish that the public in general or people in general knew the commitment that we all have to the public. We're in such a fishbowl these days that oftentimes, and just by nature of our jobs, oftentimes when we do interact, it's because you gave somebody a ticket, now they have to go to court and pay the bill. Or because their water got cut off, so now they have to call utility billing and turn the water back on, and it's a fight. But we can have a better relationship, I think, with the public, in both ways, the public we serve, and then the public really understanding this is the ins and outs of it, because everybody wants everything, but our resources are limited. Just like I'm looking at a tree outside, money doesn't grow on trees, but it's a fun balance that we have to play with. And if you remember like some of the old games like Sims, they're building out a city and providing for a city and then going from there. But so that's probably the thing I would say I wish the public knew a little bit about, but it's fun.
So let me ask you this. When you're trying to provide all this, we talk all the time about being in partnership with the public, how they don't quite understand that we are here genuinely to make their lives better. And that's a partnership that has to happen. Are there things we need to be doing as a city to interact with the public when it's not just we're writing you a ticket or we're fixing a problem? Are there things we need to be more intentional about that could strengthen that relationship and that understanding?
Yeah, I think, and I don't think this is just a local government issue. I think a lot of
Mm,
people struggle with celebrating their wins, and so it's one of those things about when you do have a great event or when you do have a workforce that has worked all night, they work 2 weeks straight, how do you celebrate them in the public eye? In
yeah.
local government, just specifically in local government, oftentimes it's, well, we shouldn't spend these money from engagement, or we shouldn't spend these dollars on employees because what will the public think? I think whenever we do spend those kind of monies, or we just provide different resources and highlight that, whether it's through social media, whether it's through podcasts, or whether it's through just general employee appreciation events, that's how you get the word out to the public. One of the things that we're looking at here in Melissa is, and a lot of cities have them, but one of the things that we're looking at here is a citizens academy, and so
Yes.
we have a police academy, we have a fire academy, but then just having a general holistic, this is what the city of Melissa does, and really teach people about local government, but local government in general, but then this is what city of Melissa does. And ideally you create advocates, and those people will be
Yeah.
able to then go out and help spread your story. I wanted to give a plug real quick to City of Melissa Facebook page, right? We're all, well, because we're all about the culture. And if you look at our page now, our public works department is being really robust and strategic about, we started a valve exercise program recently with the weather events. We're putting down ice melt, getting those videos out there, letting the guys be able to introduce themselves, but then also be able to introduce the work that they're doing and why they're doing it. Right. You know how it is when you're driving around and you see a hydrant being flushed. It's, well, why are they wasting so much water? What better way to explain that than actually have one of the public works staff explaining this is why we're doing it, and then really people who are on the social media pages, they have the ability to understand, and then they advocate like, oh no, this makes sense. And so
Hmm.
nobody will advocate, not gonna say you won't advocate, but when you put actual faces to those items or to those different services, and then you get the faces out to the public, I think that's how you get some of that support, and really just celebrating those wins, and not not being necessarily shy about celebrating those wins to the public. And so
Yeah. I think it's funny you talk about celebrating wins. It's kind of been a theme for some things we've been talking through today. And I think we can get so focused on these big, massive wins, these big top of the mountain kind of wins. We got this new economic development. We got this new housing thing happening, whatever it is. We lose sight of the fact that the only reason those big wins happen is millions of little bitty wins along the way.
right.
And so as you've kind of advanced through your career, obviously there's a ton of wins that build that up. How
Right.
cognizant have you been of stopping and celebrating wins? Like, have you built that kind of that muscle and that strength to be able to spot wins and
So
slow down to say, "Hey, let's talk about this. This was really, really good."
for myself, no, but for other people, and like, because it's like promoting other people and celebrating other people. I'll tell you, when I was in the city of Sugarland, and I take it everywhere I go, the higher up you get within any organization, it really does become less about you, And so
Yes.
it's all about how do you put other people in positions so that they can be successful and they can be happy. Ultimately, if people have jobs, the thought is that the job will get done. But if people are actually
Mhm.
happy with their job or happy on the personal side, then they're going to give you the best that they can. And so for me,
Yeah.
when it comes down to celebrating the win, it's having those discussions with the team, having those discussions with the public about, no, this person is the one who came up with the idea. This is the one who did the execution of it, and really just giving them the opportunity to, one, just celebrate that, but then also let them know, hey, because you had a hand in doing this, I'm now expanding kind of like your work, or expanding your scope
Yeah.
of work so that you get more exposure to it. And so I think I was able to get that just because of some of my background with other people who I kind of grew up with. And that was how I was taught and raised in the workforce from a professional standpoint of celebrating others. Like myself,
Mhm.
you kind of get into this mode of the job's the job. And this is probably not a good way to look at it, but it's the job's the job. We need to get this thing done. But from a city manager standpoint, that's kind of
Yeah.
that's the role we want and we accept is that okay,
Yeah.
I understand I have these pressures from political pressures, staffing pressures, or public pressures that I still need to handle. But as I'm handling
Mm.
this, I'm shielding it away from other employees who may not need to deal with that so that they can be successful at their jobs and still provide a living to their families and want to stay on board,
Mhm.
you know? And so I think from celebrating the wins, that's kind of how I've been, but it worked out. It works out well.
Let me ask you this, because I've seen, I've had a lot of city managers and a lot of assistant city managers tell me that once you get to that level, spotting wins is much harder. Because
Hmm.
before you were on the ground doing the work, it was so easy to see wins.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, unfortunately, we as leaders are humans, just like the people we lead, and
Yep.
we need to see those wins too. Is that something that, as you've kind of navigated and promoted through your career, it's become harder to even spot those wins?
I think so. I would agree with that, but I would say it's harder to spot those wins because your head is down. You're just trying to get the work done. You know, like I said,
Mm,
the list does continue to build, and you're like, okay, we got these two things done, but we have these five other things to do. And so I think to that aspect, that's why it's important to have a good team around you, not just in office team and having staff around, but a network of peers that you can have conversations with about we had this situation or this project or this program,
yeah.
and then it's like no, that's a big deal, you should be proud of yourself for that, or that's a huge accomplishment and you need to make sure that everybody in the organization knows it or you're able to communicate that well. And so but yeah, I can see that as you elevate you lose sight of some of those wins just because the wins
Mhm.
do become the larger public wins. And so making
Yeah.
sure that and one of the things that I've done, especially when I was with the city of Marshall, is creating like community engagement and employee engagement groups to where they're sitting down, at least out there, they were sitting down on a monthly basis and really looking at what did we do this month that we can. Well, we did like a monthly appreciation at the city council meeting. And it's like, what happened this month that an employee did that we can
Mhm.
actually formally recognize at a council meeting or formally recognize at an employee banquet. And so I think building teams for me it's all about building systems as well, and so as
Mhm.
you build those things are meant to capture that and then promote it and go from
Yeah. Well, you mentioned in there being able to have people around you that help you recognize things as wins.
there.
And it was funny before you mentioned that, that was going to be my next question was, what does your circle look like? Who are those people around you? Because you're obviously a very driven person. You're
Yeah,
probably one of those that is wired for the top of the mountain. And until you hit the top, it doesn't feel like victory. It doesn't feel like we're winning.
yeah.
And so who are those people around you? Is it friends, peers, mentors, coaches, spouses? Who are the people around you that point you to the wins and say, slow down, let's talk about
Yeah.
this one? This was really good. Who forces you to celebrate?
Well, one, all of the above. uh, right, like all of the above, right? But I think personally for me the two biggest ones is the family element, just
Hmm.
because I think in the very first question was about what do you wish the public knew. And
Yeah.
so as I have conversations with my family, and I'm including some of my friends as part of family, as I'm having some conversations with family, conversations with friends, and they're getting a bigger understanding of the actual scope of work of city management, it's like, oh, we had no idea that that's what the city actually does, or that's why the city does that. And so
Yeah.
oftentimes when you have a conversation, like, because it's we get so focused on the job and we're just used to it. It's our day to day. So we don't think of it as a win. When you talk to people who aren't in the business or people who are living more of like a corporate structure, and when you tell
Mhm.
them everything, they're like, oh, that's a big deal. I didn't know the fire department had to deal with that, or I didn't know that code enforcement had to go in the backyards and this is what they were dealing with. And it's like, oh, no, these are big wins. And so having those conversations allow me to come back to the organization or come back to like my peer groups and talk about, I didn't realize this, but we should probably have more conversations around code enforcement. How does code enforcement make the community
Yeah.
look, whether make the community look better or keep the community beautiful if it's new, right? And so
Yeah.
I think friends and family is one thing, but then also just peers, peers within the industry of local
Hmm.
government, just making sure that we're sharing those stories and being vulnerable. I think the vulnerability side of it, and that's us talking to each other, just communicating about, man, I just had, if you, especially if you're a city manager and you have 7 bosses, right? It's like, man, let me tell you about the week that I had, to where it's like one city manager or one city council member per day, and so in the so the peer group having those discussions, because they have an understanding of what that seat looks like. There's only one city manager. There's only one person that sits in the chair. But when you talk to other people who sat in the chair or who are currently sitting in the chair,
Yeah.
it has a different level of understanding and level of being able to be vulnerable and really share your
Hmm.
experiences or just share your thought process. When I was in Marshall, one of my favorite things was call up a friend, a city manager friend. Am I crazy for thinking XYZ? No, no, you're not. Because the thing about it is, you're not the only one that's going through that, or you're not the
Yes.
only one that's gone through that. And
Yeah.
so those
And
two, I would say, go ahead.
we have to be so intentional about the vulnerability piece, because even with city managers, I've loved how tightly networked y'all are. But even then, there can be this human need to pretend we've got it all figured out and pretend that
Right,
we're okay and that everything's going great for us. And so we have to be really intentional about the vulnerability to say, yeah, everything's not going great for me right now. I'm having a hard week. I'm having a
right,
hard month, whatever it is, because then we find the support we need. But if we're not intentional about it, we're essentially like we're in high school again, just pretending that we're not afraid and we're
one
cool and
thing,
we got it all figured out.
yeah,
And none of us are cool. Let's be honest here. And so
no,
I think that intentionality is vital. As you've navigated your career, what are some of those things you had to wrestle with internally and figure out for you to be able to advance to where you are and to get all the way to that city manager role?
yeah, I think for me internally, there's always a guilt about. So I've had an interesting career. I was with the city of
Hmm.
Sugarland, which is Houston area. It's Southwest Houston. I was there for about
Hmm.
7.5 years in some various roles, and then from there I moved to the city of Marshall, which is East Texas area. And what I'll say is, and then from Marshall I moved to the DFW area. What I'll say
Hmm.
is, when you have different roles, or if you're in an organization, you have different roles, and when promotional opportunities come up, sometimes you feel guilty about leaving people behind.
Mm.
And it's not necessarily the whole survivor's remorse still, but it's, we were working on these items, we have a good momentum going, but I know ultimately I do want to become a city manager, right? Or
Yeah.
ultimately I want to continue to grow and focus on this aspect of local government. And so
Yeah.
oftentimes you end up leaving something, and you watch it from afar and you're like, man, if I would have been there, could I have helped that? You know what I mean? Or,
Yeah.
man, I'm upset that, like, they didn't reach out to me and just ask me my thought or my opinion, because it would have been great. Oftentimes they end up doing great without you anyway. As I was told, you get somebody younger and better to do it, right? And so yeah, I know. And so, but I think for me, in the sense of like moving around through the profession or moving up, is oftentimes guilt, and kind of letting that
Mm.
guilt go, because, like, from a place like City of Marshall, love my time there. It's East Texas. It's not a major metro area. It's not the Houston, Austin area where you're at, or DFW area. So oftentimes getting talent there is a little bit harder, just because it's
Mhm.
kind of hidden, called the pine curtain. It's a little harder to do that. And if you do have something good going, and then it ends up, okay, this person is leaving, it's like, man, where do we go from here? And
Yeah.
you want to make sure that whenever you do leave a place, though, or you leave like a group behind, or you leave something, the path is still sustainable. You're still, like, access and communication is still there, so that they can pick your brain, or if you need something, you can pick their brain as well. And so, but yes, I think for me, something like that I've struggled with is, how do you continue to grow and do the things that you're actually passionate about, without getting stuck, or without feeling too
Mhm.
obligated to either one thing, and that's a tough balance, right? Because it's, you do want to make sure, no, I care about these people, or I care about
You
this, and
know,
what we're.
Guilt might be the most interesting answer I've gotten to this question because it's very unexpected. Are you generally a sentimental person anyway, just in the rest of your life?
Oh man, I don't know if I can answer that on here. Yes, I'm very empathetic, right? That's
Okay.
yes, I'm
Yeah.
extremely empathetic.
Yeah.
I like to think that I have a high like emotional awareness as well as like the whole emotional IQ standpoint of
Yeah.
things. And
That
so
creates a deep connection with people, doesn't it? And that can create
yeah,
that kind
and
of sentimentality, right? Of I want to make sure that my people are set up well, but also I don't want to leave my people. And that's a
yeah,
kind of a challenge, I think, in leadership. If we're doing a good job, we're setting our people up to function without us. And
correct.
if we're leading these massive projects, if we've done it well, we can step out and it still moves forward. It still functions. And that is both I think that's hard for us to wrap our hearts around a little bit because we really want to be needed and vital. And yet the most
Mhm.
vital role we play as leaders is training people to live without us.
And because that's ultimately what we're doing, right? Is we're training
Yes.
people to leave without you. It's the whole if you teach somebody how to fish, they can live forever, right? They can figure it out and do for
Yes.
themselves. And that's really what you want to do. But again, that ties back to the higher up you go, the less about you it really becomes, right?
Yeah.
If your goal is truly the community or if your goal is truly the public, it's how do systems, right? How do we put systems in place so that the machine can keep operating and it doesn't just need this one person? But I also think there's a lot of fear in that. You know, you often hear the whole stories of I had a boss, but they never taught me anything because they were afraid I was going to take their jobs. One of the
Mhm.
things I'll say is from like, I don't think I'm sensitive. I'll just say that. But like, but I do, but it's like one of those, no, it's, I want this person to be just as good as me or better than me because then I know that we'll win together. But there's a
Yeah,
confidence in that, right? And I don't think that
yeah.
everybody either has been instilled that confidence or just has
Mhm.
that confidence because that's the
Yeah,
leadership that we have to promote within the organization. That's the leadership quality that really has to be ingrained within the culture, right?
mhm.
Training other people, developing other people, and taking the time to do that. And so
Yeah,
I've I've seen that model, I guess, throughout my
mhm.
life. I've seen that model, both sides of it throughout my life, throughout my professional career. And it's like, I know I don't want to be that, but I know I want to be. You know what I mean? And so it's like, okay, how did that make me feel? And I want to make sure that I can always give back to certain people or certain things and go from there.
Yeah. Training people up to lead themselves and replace us almost is it's this never-ending grind because if you're doing a good job in developing people, they're going to get promotions and go to other departments. They're going to get
Mhm.
promotions and go to other organizations and they're going to grow and it's a really good thing, but it is also this never-ending journey and this never-ending
Mhm.
grind to keep that machine going. And ultimately, we're the driver of that machine. How have
Yeah.
you wrestled with through your career so far, creating a sustainability to that so that you're not burning out in the process? If you hit any of those walls of burnout and had to kind of figure out how to back off a little and heal up and get back to it.
Yeah, I mean, one. So I was when I was city of Marshall, I was city manager for about 2.5 years, right?
Hmm.
A lot of the things that we tried to do there or that we did there were newer to the community from a process standpoint or thought standpoint.
Yeah.
Privatization of a couple of aspects. You know, Parks and Rec is always a big deal. We had a parks program where we wanted to do some renovations to the ball fields out there, Airport
Hmm.
Park ball fields, and as a part of that, it was how can we contract third party? How can we get third party to actually come and maintain and run different leagues? And so when you're talking about that kind of change, it's will our kids still be able to go and use the park, or we're going to have to pay now to go and use the park? It's like yes, you do. And so I bring that example up just because that had a lot of like public scrutiny and had a lot of
Yeah.
it had just a lot of it was just a lot right, but from a public standpoint when you get through it, you get through the end and everything ends up working out the way that you want it to work out. It's like okay, how do we recharge? Again, the recharging aspect of it is having peers that you're able to talk to, not being
Mhm.
ashamed to say, I'm just going to take a couple of days off and kind of clear my mind and go into, everybody has their own little happy place, right? How do you take some time away and being okay taking time away in order to recharge? Oftentimes we just get into the rat race, right? And it's like you look up, it's 3 years later, and I didn't take any time off for myself.
Yeah.
Oftentimes we have that in our contract of no, you get your personal days. You need to make sure that you use your personal days for this. And then for me, I've learned that the TCMA conference is one, and then ICMA conference is one, to where just the timing of those ends up being two breaks of okay, I can spend time with my peers and we can all kind of just discuss what our struggles are. We can discuss what our successes are, and that's always allows me to recharge and be revigorated. And then also, like I said, just
Yep.
taking time away and being okay taking time away. And so
Yep. We talk about rest all the time as being active. It is actively doing things with a lot of intention that bring life back to you, that restore
Mhm.
you and rejuvenate you. What are some of
Sure.
those things that actually bring life to you when you take those 2 days to recover or
Yeah,
whatever it is? What does that look like for you?
man. Now, so I'm a bowler, and so I like to go out.
Really? That's
Yeah, it's
cool.
when I kind of take some time away, I like to just disconnect, go bowling with some friends. Go. This is like taking days away, right? Going
Yeah.
bowling and everything. I'm really big with water, and so one of the things that I'm getting ready to get back into is fishing and scuba diving. And so I got
Yep.
certified on the scuba diving side of things, and wanted now that the world is kind of going full go again, want to get out to the islands and get away for that. And it's really I went to Tennessee recently, and so Tennessee Smoky Mountains area, and
Yep.
so really just trying to travel. When I
Yeah.
say travel, it means more than just get out from work. It means really disconnect from the city, disconnect from it. This sounds terrible because you disconnect, you still have your work phone, you still have your laptop, and you're checking things just to make sure it's okay. But it's like, okay, I'm off, I'm away, I can have fun and disconnect. Then I'm scrolling. I need to respond to that one, right? And
Can
so,
can we agree that's not true disconnection?
yeah, we can, but still,
Still gonna do
I
it
mean,
as long as we agree on
it,
what we're doing.
yeah, okay. But and so but getting some new hobbies in that sense, trying to be
Yeah.
outside a little bit more, just enjoy nature, hiking and everything, and trying to get just more in tune with nature, more in tune with kind of self. I'm not gonna say I'm a
It's
yoga
beautiful.
guy, but I may or not have done yoga a couple of times here recently to
Good
just
for
try and get,
you.
and so I think some of that, the physical like physical activities for me helps me kind of
Yes.
de-stress, helps me refocus, helps me get clarity, and go from there.
Yeah, that matters a lot because it's when we think about scuba diving, for instance, when you're underwater, that is some of the most valuable time for you because you actually are truly disconnected at that point, right? You're
You
not
are,
pulling your phone out and scrolling through emails to see what council members texting you at that point. You are solely focused on the world around you and how do I continue to exist in this world? And I think what's
and
interesting
it's
is you
good. Sorry,
go
go ahead.
ahead.
I was going to. It kind of ties back to the yoga piece, because scuba diving is all about your breathing,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And so it's all about breath control and kind of pacing yourself on that, not getting too anxious and just
Yeah.
breathing in and out, breathing in and out. And so that's a really relaxing thing. And for anybody
Yeah.
who's done it, the sound that it makes is almost soothing. And
Yes.
so and so like something like that, just to refocus or retraining
Yeah.
and everything. But so yeah,
And there's so much value in that because when you're underwater like that, or even you're doing yoga, you're focused on something that is not work. And the
yes,
value there is then our brains are in the background processing work. They're focused,
yes,
our brain is focused on the challenges. And when we have those just out of nowhere crazy solutions, that is because your brain has been working in the background on this problem, but the answer never comes out when we're in front of a computer. It never comes
never.
out when we're in a meeting. It happens when we're underwater, when we're experiencing something outside of our norm and we're disconnected. And so we fight this fight all the time with leaders, getting them to truly try disconnection.
You
Actual,
know,
like, I'm not plugged in. I'm not connected all the time. Like we work on that, and it's really hard to get leaders to do that.
So I'll say this. I may or may not have been in the Smoky Mountains and sent off an email that said, we'll discuss this later, but I want to talk to you about whatever I did I just had. And so it's because that's really how it happens, right? Is
Yeah.
you're disconnected or you're just enjoying life and then you'll see something and then it just registers, oh, we do have this issue back home. And I think I just found the
Yes.
solution, you know? And so
Which
that's
means when we refuse to disconnect, when we refuse to rest, we stay engaged, we stay at work, we're working too many hours, we are actually robbing our cities and our people of the best solutions. And it's hard to get people to understand that and believe that, but it's true.
yeah, and I think so that point kind of goes to I'll sleep when I die. I think growing up, it's always no, I only have 24 hours in a day. I need to maximize
Yeah.
my time, which is a fact, right? You do need to
Yeah.
maximize your
Yep.
time, but you also need sleep and rest. Your body
Yes.
is going to function at its best, at its peak when you're rested. But again, resting doesn't just mean sitting on the couch. It can, but
No.
if you're intentional, right? It means like
Right.
getting
When
out.
you're intentional, when it's 2 hours to sit on the couch and watch a movie, that's great. When it's
Yeah,
12 hours and we're
that's
just
different.
scrolling mindlessly on Instagram while Netflix is
That's
cycling
different.
show after show, that's
Correct.
less helpful, right?
Correct. Correct. You're just wasting time at that point, you know.
Yeah.
And so yeah, but yeah, getting that real rest and kind of just refreshing yourself. That's what it's all about. And for me, really recently, I'm 35 now, so I'm like an old man
Mhm.
in my own right. I made it. I say on my gray patch, and so just making sure that on the physical side, making sure
Yeah.
that I found probably the last really when I was in Marshall, kind of like getting out more of nature and everything, and that's been kind of the way
Yeah.
that I'm able to keep going and keep refreshed. So,
Yeah. I'm curious. So you're 35. You've already been a city manager once. You're currently an
mhm.
assistant city manager. My guess is more city management is in your future.
Yes.
What are some of the things that you learned through being a very young city manager? Because I know that city management presents very unique challenges,
Mhm.
and I don't know if being younger versus older, if that adds to the challenges or if you bring a unique perspective. Tell me a little bit about your experience being a younger city manager.
Yeah, it definitely brings a unique perspective just because from an age standpoint, it's
Hmm.
also how I grew up. Like we were talking a little bit earlier about technologies, right? It
Yeah.
was so funny when I first got to Marshall. One of the first things I did was I changed my desk. I had an older executive desk. It's a big,
Hmm.
bulky,
Yep.
round desk that everybody
Oh yeah.
has. I got rid of it probably in the first 2 weeks and had kind of a standing desk that was much smaller.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so everybody would come in and joke, and they're like, "Where's your desk at?" And I'm like, "It's right here." But I did it, and I do it even here, is because I want to be as paperless as possible. I want to
Mhm.
work through technology. I want to work through workflows. I want to work through some of the different platforms that are out there instead of just pen and paper, which we still all use, but instead of just
Mhm.
having that. And so when you're younger, it's a balance. It's a delicate balance, actually. But when you're younger, it's how do you teach people who have been doing their job successfully at that for the last 30 or 40 years? How do you teach them that it's okay to try a new way? Because
Yeah.
oftentimes it's like, yes, the way that you're doing it, it works. You're extremely successful at it, and you can see like the city's been doing it. It's fine, but there is another way that we can do this that'll free up some time for you to focus on other things
Yeah.
or free up some time for us to kind of do a little bit better and push this one project forward a little bit more. And so just when you're younger, you have to be mindful that I think most young city managers, I think I was 30 when I first got to Marshall, either 30 or 31 when I first got there. I think oftentimes we come in, and I was lucky because my dad is military, and so he kind of taught me some
Mhm.
of it. But we come in as I'm the city manager. You're going to do what I say because I went to school for it, right? And
Yeah.
everybody's looking at you like this kid has no idea. So I think just being younger, asking the people who've been there. So what
Mm.
are we doing? Why are we doing it like this? What do you want to see? And really just building that kind of camaraderie and that camaraderie and that respect level amongst the two. And then like, okay, we should change this, or we should tweak this, or we should do this and do that, and then go from there. Because yeah, there is
Mm.
my pops, he did 24 years in the military army, right? And so he was enlisted, and we would always talk about, you have the enlisted and then officer, and so
Mhm.
oftentimes when I became a city man, I said, oh, I'm an officer right now, right? And so it's like, okay, how do I what were the things that typically go wrong between some of those relationships when the person is first into that seat and first into that role,
Mhm.
and how do I need to maneuver through those different things? And so I think for a younger city manager or young city managers to just be a little bit patient and really just like
Mm.
observe what's going on, really get the buy-in and the trust of everybody to I talk about the technology and the paper thing. It's how do you warm people up to be comfortable doing that? And then how do
Yeah.
you ask questions to where it's still challenging questions so that we can do the things we want to do and making sure that we're
Mhm.
progressing, not remaining stagnant. But how do you kind of frame those questions in a way that is not either not intimidating or it's not like belittling of somebody, you know,
Yeah.
and really
Does
understanding
it
that. That
does it require a level of vulnerability to do that, to be in charge and yet say, "But I need y'all's expertise, I need your feedback because I don't know everything."
I think so. It does just because you're trying to prove something, right? And
Mm.
so from my time as when I first got to Marshall, it's like I'm also trying to prove that I know what I'm talking about, right? And so it's like I know what I'm talking about. I need you all to trust that I know what I'm talking about. So just do it. And then it's like, well, it doesn't work that way, right? Because they understand how this like they've been here 30 years. You've been here 30 years. You understand how the system works. And I
They've
don't
been here
know.
as long as you've been alive, literally.
Oh, trust me. Listen, if I had $1 for every time I heard that, I'd be a rich man right now. It's like,
Right? You could have already retired.
you know, and so I could have been scuba diving all over the world at this point.
Uh-huh.
But no, and so it's like, okay, how do you? And some of that's like you live and you learn kind of
Yeah.
situation into where it's like, okay, I probably should have been a little bit more vulnerable here, or I probably
Yeah.
should have been a little bit more direct here. And
Yeah.
so it's one of those things that you do have to be comfortable. And I don't know, maybe even if you're an older city manager and it's your first time doing it, you just need to be aware of identifying those things and being okay that it's going to happen. But the next time it comes up, who are you talking to with regards to kind of like what the issue, project is, program is, which person you're talking to, what your audience is, and how do I need to adjust my approach next time we have something that comes up,
Yeah.
or how do I
Yeah.
set these expectations for the next time this item comes up, and then going from there.
Mhm.
Because yeah, ultimately everybody kind of learns kind of the temperament of who they're working with. Everybody learns kind of the energies and the feels and everything about what's going on within the office, or what social media is saying today, or which from a political standpoint, what are people talking about, and then going from
Mhm.
there. And it's once you learn those things, everybody becomes a little bit more comfortable. That
Yeah.
you know what to expect, you know how to approach it, and then you go from there. But yeah, being a younger city manager is definitely fun, because I would definitely say that even the people who've told me that they've been doing it longer than I've been alive, I brought you bring energy, right? That's a lot of the
Yes.
expectation is you
Yeah.
bring some energy to the workplace, you bring some fun to the workplace, and it's like, okay, what's going to happen today? Because Terrell's crazy, right? And then go from there. Yeah.
Let me ask you this. The one of the challenges facing a lot of cities is recruiting. It's getting new people into the pipeline
Sure,
to do a lot of these jobs. And so part of this is I don't know if we do a good enough job telling the story to younger folks about public service. What are some
sure.
things you wish young people thinking about public service understood about it? What's some advice you would have for them if they were considering getting into it?
Well, it pays okay. I think most people are like local government's not, and I think what
There's the
I think
poster right there. Local
it pays
government, it
okay.
pays okay.
I think the what I've been told a couple of times is no, you're not going to necessarily become super rich and wealthy,
Right.
but you will make a good living, right? You'll make an
Yes.
honest living,
Yeah.
and it has all with cities. I'll speak for Texas from a benefit standpoint, from a retirement standpoint. You do have a lot
Mhm.
of different opportunities out there to financially be okay. And so I think
Yes. Yeah.
oftentimes, because oftentimes people are, oh, you work for the city, there's this whole rat race and chasing these different things that you'll be okay if you working for a city.
Yeah.
So that's a truth and a joke all in one, right? But
Yep.
I think
Yep.
just in general, the scope of what a city does, right?
Yeah.
Oftentimes people don't know what all the city does, and so you have a lot of people who go to school for finance degrees. You have a lot of people who go to school for engineering degrees, and they don't think, or they're not presented, or they're not exposed to, I'll say, civil engineering. On the engineering side oftentimes is, I want to be an engineer, so I go work for Lockheed Martin or somebody, right? And it's
Mhm.
like, no, you can go work for either you can work for a city, work through the engineering department, or work to become like a city engineer, or you can work for a bigger engineering firm and do civil engineering and work alongside cities. And so just the engineering, talk about the financing, we're still doing
Mhm.
budgeting, we're still doing accounting, we're still doing like audits and everything like that. And so just the full scope of work that we do. And then if you're
Yeah.
somebody that wants to be a little bit more hands-on, depending on what your background is, and you want to be a little bit more hands-on and you have more of a trade school or a technical skill set, looking
Mhm.
at facility maintenance, looking at public works, looking at fleet management, looking at fire, police departments, and especially if you go to a smaller city. Well, I guess it's both. If you go to a smaller city, we need more people that wear multiple hats. And so if you have
Yes.
these different skills, you can go into a small city and kind of work in multiple departments and really have just a lot of exposure to that. Or you can go to a larger city, to where larger cities have specialists in those things, right? And
Yes.
so I think the just the scope and the opportunities that a city can provide to somebody is one thing that I
Yeah.
wish we had out there a little bit more. And so I know working with colleges, working with some of the universities that have MPA programs, working with high schools and everything from a curriculum standpoint to
Mhm.
make sure that public administration, not just political science, but true public administration that talks about the council manager, like that really talks about that, are some of those key things that
Yeah.
I wish we got out there a little bit more, or we can do a little bit better on. Like when I was in Marshall, we created an internship program, and so getting the
Mhm.
kids that are in high school to get the opportunity to come in, because two of the big things that kids in high school like: Parks and Rec, communications. You talk about having a podcast studio or a design
Yeah.
studio. A lot of cities now are building out communication departments that look like an actual media company, right?
Yes.
And so
Yeah.
just the different technologies that are in there. And so I think really just expanding that exposure, making more people aware of the full scope of work that we do is
Mhm.
one of those things that will get people interested in it and
Yeah,
get
that
people interested.
variety
Mhm.
I was gonna say
Uh,
that variety, there's so many different ways into public service, but so many experiences. You can work 30 years in service and have a wildly different experience than anybody else because of the different
Absolutely.
tracks and the different things you get exposed to. One of the
Absolutely.
things we're trying to do with this project and with everything we're doing is creating a movement towards sustainability and towards thriving for teams. So, what are
Mm.
some things that cities need to kind of rethink or think in a new way about in order to create an environment where people can thrive, where they can have long, sustainable, impactful careers and not burn out in the process?
Yeah, I think one, just listening. I
Mm,
think understanding listening on two fronts on that, I guess. From a resource standpoint, what is it that our teams need, to be successful in their jobs, to actually meet the goals, right? One of the things that I asked today, and then I've asked is, what does success look like? you know
yeah.
and so it's like, once we really define what success looks like, okay, what are the resources that you actually need in order to get us here? to that success, right? And then it's not just let's throw money at it or let's throw additional bodies at it, but from a process standpoint, what do you really need for us to be able to do this, or what kind of direction do you really need? And so I think just listening to our teams, having that resource management and providing those resources, or providing the opportunity for them to go and get that resource, is a big deal for people.
Hmm.
Oftentimes it's, yeah, I'm working here, they're asking for this, but we can't do it. And so we're getting yelled at, or we're getting the blame for not being able to perform or not being able to meet the expectations. Well, I'm not going to just deal with that, right? And so they'll pack up and leave. And so you also want to make sure that everybody has their resources. And then also think, just looking at just general macro trends. There's this
Hmm.
long thought in government about, which is funny. It's funny because our current climate,
Hmm.
there's always been this kind of thought in government of government should run like a business, right? Like, how can governments be more efficient, and what do they
Yeah.
need to do to make the government more efficient? But looking at macro trends, whether it's in
Hmm.
working from home, whether it's technology usage, whether it's AI usage, in government, it's a big
Hmm.
conversation about what can we use it for. But looking at those macro trends and identifying how that works internally for your organization, right?
Yeah.
Because what works for
That kind
Melissa,
of
oh, go ahead, sorry.
Well, I was going to say it matters deeply because we're not just competing with other cities for employees.
No, we're
We're
not.
competing with the private sector as well, and they're offering some of these things. You can find the more advanced use of technology. You can find work from home. You find all these different things, and so in order to create a competitive environment, we've got to embrace some of those things too.
We do.
I don't know if it's enough to say we've got a great retirement plan. It used to be. I think 20,
Correct.
30 years ago, like that was plenty. As long as it's steady and I can retire, we're good. And that
Yeah,
doesn't quite work anymore, does it?
it doesn't work, and people aren't staying at their one job for 20 years either, right? And so it's
Yeah.
like, as people are looking for new things or new opportunities from a financial standpoint, it's somebody will leave if they're going to get a 20% or 30% pay increase, right? But
Yes.
I'm willing to argue that they'll stay and take 10% or 5% less if the environment's better. Maybe 15%
Yes.
less if they know that the environment's better and they have more flexibility, or the job and the organization
Hmm.
cares about not just their work product, but
Yeah. But
themselves, their life, their
yes,
family,
them. Yeah.
And so I think government, we're a little rigid in some of that aspect of it, and some
Mm,
of it we have to be, right? This goes back to why I say
yeah.
I wish the public knew how committed we were. This is the
Yeah.
public works groups, the fire departments, the code enforcement, the utility billing group that has to go read the water meters at in 17-degree like weather. They still have to go out there and do those things. And so it's like thanking their families for really being a part of that and allowing that to happen. And so,
Yeah.
if from a government standpoint, what are some of those other trends, whether it's flexibility with the schedule, what kind of benefits can we offer? Is it still just the classic sick vacation? Do you want to go ahead and give
Mhm.
PTO? Is it how much time off are we giving for like people who are on maternity, paternity leave? What are we offering in that
Yep.
standpoint? And just being really creative in that aspect, I think, is something that we need to do. But beyond the benefits is the technology. Are we providing people with access to technology to do their jobs? Are we giving them the most up to date technology, or are we still working on Windows 97? Right? You can't say that, right? You can't say that you want an efficient
Yeah.
department if you're not upgrading their technology. And so those are
I
some of
was
the
working with the city. I'm so sorry. I was working with the city last week, and we were working on this model to identify what our true capacity is.
mhm,
And so, based on all these different factors, and one of the factors they listed that I hadn't really thought about was equipment. They said if we
yeah,
don't have the things we need to do the job well, that matters. And I read everything from, we think equipment, we think big trucks and things like that, all the way down to are we using really high quality laptops? Are we using whatever garbage we could get for $300 because it was the cheapest,
Right.
you know? That kind of
They
stuff
never
matters.
came
If I have to
down.
fight, yeah, if I have to fight my technology all the time, I don't feel like a valued employee. If I get nice
Right.
stuff, I feel like somebody cares and I'm more driven and engaged. And I think there's something to that.
Yeah, and I think that's where the leadership comes into play at, right? It's because it's not about the pet projects or the special projects that we want to get done and put our names to and
Yeah.
say, oh, this is my legacy project. It's
Yeah.
the how can I look at our resources that we have available as a city in order to allow the person that is fixing the HVAC or is in charge of the plumbing will make sure that he or she has everything that they need in order to make sure the facility is clean, right? We have a
Yeah.
public library that services the community and making sure that the library is clean and is presentable and people can come in and either read books. We have a lot of people that do homeschooling here.
Hmm.
How do we invest in those things so that people still want to come and use it? Because ultimately,
Yeah.
believe it or not, people may or may not move to your city because of that, you know. And so there's the small things that people look at when they're driving around. Of course, you're
Yep.
driving around, you want to make sure the school system is nice, but you're also driving around. Is the potholes messing up my car? You know, am I chip teeth? Am I chipping my teeth every time I drive here? Do they have a nice park system? All of those things we have to invest back into it and then go from
Yeah.
there. But the
Yeah.
fundamental part of your question about the workforce is, are they getting what they need, you know, in order to be
Hmm.
successful in their jobs? And are they feeling like sustained? Are they feeling
Yeah.
fulfilled? Because the other piece is like you I was going to say you don't want people to get stagnant or feel stuck, you know, and hit a ceiling.
Hmm.
That may or
Yep.
may not happen depending on the capacity that you have, but it's,
Yeah.
are you identifying talent? Are you identifying different needs that are being presented and kind of allowing people to grow and experiment in that sense? And so
Yeah.
so those are some of the things that I think, you know, like that was one of my funnest
Yeah.
things in Marshall was kind of some of the structuring of that and putting people in position to meet what council was wanting or meet what the public was
Yes.
wanting. And then not only are you meeting that, you're getting people within the organization that want to stay within the organization because they get to do something new, right?
Yeah.
It's not often that in your career you get to do something new. You know, you're in your 20s, yeah, you know, you're doing new things. It's, you know, 30s, it kind of starts to stale, but you want to
Yeah.
make sure that the job is still new. And so I think you also
Yeah.
keep people, again, they may leave, you're right, they may leave, but you also keep people a little longer by giving them new
Hmm.
opportunities to learn, giving them new opportunities to prove something to themselves that they can do
Yeah.
it or that they're capable in doing it. And so,
Yeah.
because yeah, ultimately you don't, I'm not going to say most people would not want to just do the same thing for 20 years, but give people new things within that 20 years. They want consistency
Yeah.
within that 20 years, but they would still want to be able to be challenged and do new things. So,
Yep. All that ultimately contributes to creating a journey people love. That day to day, it's not just about that final retirement date. Day to day, they love the team, they love the work, they can maintain that heart for public service. And that's what we're after with all these conversations and how we get leaders to focus on this to create that sustainability, man. Terrell, this
right.
has been a phenomenal conversation, man. I deeply appreciate you doing this. Be willing to come on here and share your wisdom. And despite the people that are willing to say, I've been doing this longer than you've been alive, you got a lot of wisdom to share, man. And that means a
No,
lot. So
it's all
thank you
fun.
so much for doing this.
No, thanks for having me on, man. Really excited about it. Thank you for the opportunity. Like I said, next time I will want to come down in person, though. And so next time I'll
Absolutely.
schedule some time around that, and then we can do it that way as well. And so really enjoyed it.
Yes, sir. Thank you, brother. Thank you for joining us for Leading Thriving Cities. If you'd like to find out more about what we do at Forward Partners, you can find us at www.forwardpartners.net. We love partnering with cities to learn how to develop healthy leaders and thriving teams. We do that through a variety of means, from leadership coaching to online courses to facilitating retreats. If you ever need anything, please feel free to reach out. You can also find us online with all the different socials, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. We are putting out content all the time, and you can find it at Forward Partner.